structure, the outlook, and the composition of the Electoral Commission has also changed 7 times. The Chesoni Commission, the Kivuitu Commission, the IPPG Commission of 2002, the Interim Independent Electoral Commission, IIC, that managed the 2010 referendum, Amirizaka IEBC, Chebukati IEBC, and the Chebukati-Cherera IEBC of 2022. As the country prepares for the 8th multi-party elections, we are talking about the need to reconstitute the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, and that would be effectively the 8th commission to manage the 8th multi-party elections since 2002. Master's degree in law and a research dissertation on reforming election management and administration. In as much as I believed very strongly on an expert model electoral commission, what I received in terms of and contained in this thesis, in terms of the recommendation across the board, shocked me. That increasingly the country preferred an IPPG-based model. I disagreed with it, but I came up and had that as my conclusion because I had to pay attention to the comments and the feedback and the opinion of the respondents that I interviewed.
Welcome to the bold analysis. If you missed the submission by the Electoral Law and Governance Institute of Africa, then it is the right time to get this from this podcast. Of all those submissions, I want to tell you that I sampled this one and I wanted to get what they're telling this country.
Now, if you analyze the elections that Kenya has held since '92, I respectfully submit, honorable chairs, that this country finds itself in a phenomenon called the inconclusive electoral cycle. Simply put, it denotes a situation where elections do not bring finality or conclusion. Elections reveal certain challenges, shortcomings, and in certain instances problems. The same are not addressed and are imported in the subsequent elections. That is why, honorable chairs, some of the issues that you are dealing with here today, including reconstitution of IEBC, issues of electoral justice, have been with us since '92, and they were not conclusively or effectively dealt with. Countries that undergo electoral cycles have 2 characteristics. Number 1, election campaign or electioneering is a permanent feature that begins immediately the president is sworn in and continues relentlessly until the next election is held. The second, the countries, Kenya, Chad, Democratic Republic of Congo are some of the examples. The second attribute of countries undergoing through this electoral cycle is that electoral reforms are either stall or they are skewed. This has been the case in Kenya without naming examples, but also a typical example is Tanzania, where the constitutional review process in 2015 outrightly collapsed. Now, if you look at the Kenyan electoral landscape, at least over the last electoral cycle, there are certain systemic and recurring features of these elections that have existed with us to date, and some of which this dialogue committee is currently dealing with. And these are some of the issues that we want to make a proposal on with a view to reforming or securing electoral justice or the credibility of elections in this country. The first, honorable chairs, is on election management and administration, or if you may, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. As I've noted, if you look at our elections over the last electoral cycle, there have been incremental progress. But again, there have been certain persistent challenges that have featured since 2022. One, of course, that was dealt with by the Supreme Court was on the corporate governance, the question of disunity and division within the commission, the question of elite interference in the electoral process by both sides of the political divide, if you may, but also the constitutional and legislative design on the structure of the commission. Honorable Chairs, as I've noted, we've had to demonstrate how problematic this problem has been, is to appreciate the fact that we've had 7 multi-party elections since '92. And over that period of time, the structure, the outlook, and the composition of the Electoral Commission has also changed 7 times. The Chesoni Commission, the Kivuitu Commission, the IPPG Commission of 2002, the Interim Independent Electoral Commission, IIC, that managed the 2010 referendum, Amirizaka IEBC, Chebukati IEBC, and the Chebukati-Cherera IEBC of 2022. As the country prepares for the 8th multi-party elections, we are talking about the need to reconstitute the Independent Electoral and Boundary Commission, and that would be effectively the 8th commission to manage the 8th multi-party elections since 2002. If you look at the international best practices of designing an electoral commission, and part of what I want to persuade this committee to consider is that there are 3 criteria that are required to design a commission. Number 1 is the legitimacy and acceptance, the perceived degree of legitimacy or acceptance of the commission, perceived degree of independence and autonomy, perceived degree of service, and finally the perceived degree of service delivery. These are the 3 tests that are usually invoked to assess a credible electoral commission. In this continent, it's probably the Ghana Electoral Commission and the South African Electoral Commission that meets these 3 tests. Whereas there have been progress in the Electoral Commission, and I'm mindful of the work that IEBC did in 2022, these 3 tests have not fully been realized. And I think this dialogue committee may make recommendations on improving the Electoral Commission to meet this test.
Now, this group made that presentation in Bomas of Kenya. And of all those submissions, there is something unique about them. I think they're the ones that gave an in-depth analysis about our electoral hygiene since 1992. Also, they actually acknowledged that whatever is happening in Bomas is for the betterment of our electoral process. But that is not why I'm picking it. I want us to draw some few takeaways from that presentation, and I'll tell you why we actually picked it in this podcast. Kindly subscribe to our channel. We are, how many hours? Yes, we are. I decided we are going to close this on Friday morning at Friday 6. So we are day to the end of our fundraiser. For those who had already been promising to participate, kindly help us support take Edwin to Kirinyaga University. It will be taken on Friday. So I believe that that's why we are doing 100 shillings challenge. That boy was got C+ and was supposed to join Kirinyaga University to undertake a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering with computing, but there were some challenges. So we decided to chip in as Team Bold as our project for October to support this boy. So kindly let's support, and I'm just so grateful for those who are already showing interest. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. There is a very contentious issue in Bomas of Kenya. It is both at the top and under the table. Leave alone even the audit of the last presidential election. It is reconstitution of the IEBC. And the stalemate, I can tell you, the breaking point will be that stalemate of IPPG or Commission Way. I'm going to explain that. IPPG is what Raila team are saying, let political parties participate in picking commissioners. Then government side is saying, let's maintain the status quo so that the commission is picked by selection panel that was already put in place by William Ruto. And I'm going to debunk that hapa mbele. let's get back to a review of what that organization have done. But then let me tell you, I want you to really remember this photo. This is the photo when Kalonzo Musyoka met with the Mudavadi in a Nakuru hotel. It was 2 weeks ago. It was some 2 weeks ago. And so, it is that organization that had organized, because they had organized some workshop on electoral reforms. And that's when the two leaders were invited. So, they're not new. They were not new before the Bomas team. I like some 3 observations that we've been making, and I think it helps us to, it's what this country needs to understand. We have had reforms in the past, but they have either been stalled or skewed. When the gentleman who was making that presentation said he's been doing research, and this is what he realized Kenyans want.
Master's degree in law and a research dissertation on reforming election management and administration. In as much as I believed very strongly on an expert model electoral commission, what I received in terms of and contained in this thesis, in terms of the recommendation across the board, shocked me. That increasingly the country preferred an IPPG-based model. I disagreed with it, but I came up and had that as my conclusion, because I had to pay attention to the comments and the feedback and the opinion of the respondents that I interviewed. Now, I then questioned the efficacy looking at the work of similar commissions in Africa. In 2015, Mozambique adopted the IPPG model arising from Kenya. Now, what Frelimo did was essentially to buy all the commissioners that were nominated by Renamo. Again, in DRC, that is exactly what happened. But if you look at Kenya and election management as a context, if you look at the last 3 electoral cycles, I've come to the conclusion that in as much as I have supported very strongly the expert independent model, I think the situation and the Kenyan context, and also mindful of the 2002 elections, which is probably one of the best elections this country has ever had, I think this committee should consider a mixed model of IPPG and expert commission. The second thing is this committee will have to make a recommendation on dealing with the structure and the design of the Independent Electoral Commission, and I'm talking about the relationship between the Secretariat as well as the Commission. If you look at the Electoral Commission since the last 3 electoral cycles, there have been tension. In 2013, the tension between the then chairperson Ahmed Isaac and the CEO Oswago. In 2017, there was tension between the chair, Chebukati, and Ezra Chiloba. There was also in 2017 tension between the commissioners themselves. And I think in 2022, we had and we saw what happened in Bomas, serious disunity among the commission. In as much as the Supreme Court dealt with this issue, I think this committee would have to make a recommendation, possibly modeled around the Ghana Electoral Commission, where the 2 centers of power, that is the obvious result and outcome of the legal framework that we have now, that creates 2 centers of power, would have to be addressed.
And so, the issue of reforms, we don't still have a finality. Number 2, our elections have failed to give Kenyans a finality. That what is using by that finality is just to say that Kenyans, after elections, they don't put the last nail on it. It has failed to convince the population. And I like the last bit about the best model, the model of the global practice, recommended model for constituting IBC. And I wanted to think, if you've been following Kenyan politics, he's saying degree of independence, delivery, and acceptance. If you had the privilege of being in this country 2002, 2007, 2013, 2017, and 2022. Do you think we have achieved, as he's asking, he's saying only in Kenya, it's only South Africa and I think Ghana. So even if you look at 2022, look at Chebukati. Was Chebukati even accepted? Independence. And would Chebukati even be in a position to deliver? By then, Mimi, if you ask me, I can tell you that Chebukati had all those. Zote. Lacked all. Lacked all. Because how could it be that a day to general election, some 2 counties cannot vote for their governor? That's the delivery. How can it be that the live transmission that was early agreed had to be stopped somewhere? How can it be that you have a divided commission and you still sneak through to Bomas and give people some results? You've lost your independence. You needed to acknowledge the fact that there is a problem and you need to get it. Guys, I really like, and let me tell you, game shot. Game shot. Kenyans want IPPG. That's what he's saying there. Even though he was vouching for upgrade, but even when he was making that presentation, I was like, we don't just go and pick people because it's political parties, because we just bring debris together, some debris together and have a commission. I was also for the hybrid, where we have experts, but even people picked by political parties must be experts anyway. You know, so it still must be based on competency. But Kenya Kwanza are insisting that they don't want to go the IPPG. Political parties should not be given the autonomy to participate in making that commission. But according to me, it will boost the level of acceptance. It will boost the level of acceptance. And again, when all the parties are represented, then our interests are on table. So there is an environment of suspicion where I suspect if I do this, he's going to tell his party boss. But let's debunk this truth, this thing, for this assertion from Kenya Kwanza. It is not true, and this one, I'm telling Cleophas Malala, it is not true that the commission can be made, the commissioners can be procured through the panel process and it still achieves independence. I want to tell you how. Look at the membership of the selection panel. There is a membership from Parliamentary Service Commission. Who is the head of parliament? Who is the head of Parliamentary Service Commission? Moses Wetangula. There is a representation from Law Society of Kenya. The Law Society of Kenya is supposed to be neutral. You may want to ask, are they normally neutral? I am not sure. There is a representation from Political Parties Liaison Committee. Political Parties Liaison Committee is a committee whose salaries and allowances are paid by government of Kenya. Is a man who, when William Ruto wants to fire him, William Ruto can fire him. You know, look at the representation from the church. Aren't you seeing church members taking positions in our politics? Look at that representation, which simply tell you that the process is compromised as it is. Then from there, some 2 names are supposed to be submitted to the president. Then the president is to pick one. Then take to parliament for vetting. Surely. So how do we have, after that committee, the 2 names are suggested to the president. The president picks one, then takes to the National Assembly for vetting. Then from that, it seems at a point where the president will make a choice, we shall lose the independence. We'll tell, oh, wewe nimekupatia kazi bana. Wewe unajua ningechukua nani hapa? Ningekuchukua Cherera hapa, wewe acha nikuchukue. You know. So that in terms of independence, I think in Kenya Kwanza is a bit, they're actually off the mark. Now, I want to tell you why William Ruto is insisting on the status quo. Why the Kenya Kwanza doesn't want APPG. Number one, is free and fair elections in 2027 have a big possibility of knocking Ruto out. Tuambieni ukweli, things are bad. Things are bad. Everyone is crying, starting from the farmer in Kitale, who is saying, I was given fertilizer, I got fertilizer, now I can't sell my maize to NCBA and I have to sell my maize to some brokers from Uganda at a throwaway price. The coffee farmer in the mountain is crying. The policeman is crying. The other civil servants are crying of taxes. The parent who has a child in the university is crying of the new funding model. You know, someone who has a sick person in hospital is having a problem of the new model of the health model. And the person using transport, public transport every day, has to work with a very unpredicted budget because of the fluctuating prices over the cost of fuel. And the businesses are also having a problem to even import goods to the Kenya because of the Kenyan shilling. So who is not crying? And that is why Ruto will still want the status quo. A team that he will still pick that can be remote controlled. Number two is the coalition quagmire. Kenyan politics is anchored on coalitions. So there are coalition of political parties. Look at what's happening in Kenya Kwanza, where they want to clamp down all those parties together. Then you say that each party to produce one. You know, if you look at the way parties are, number one, it should be ODM, but it's now UDA, then ODM, then Jubilee, then Wiper, then ANC, then Ford Kenya. So if you look, if Ford Kenya and ANC are absorbed in UDA, then UDA will only have one. if we go IPPG, then Jubilee. And because of that coalition quagmire, they don't want to allow parties, because again, it's going to make other parties to thrive. Number three, this is a ground that can forestall elections. There is a clause that says if a commissioner dies or a commissioner resigns, or some two or three commissioners resign, and it lacks quorum, then elections can be postponed. So let me say, if all opposition candidates decide that we are seeing this election is going to be rigged, and they talk with their members who are in that commission to resign, then you wake up one morning and you realize that out of 5, you have 7 commissioners and 4 are from the political parties. All the 3 opposition commissioners that are picked by opposition parties, have resigned. Then what does it show? That election first lacks the merit, and that elections can be bungled. So they know very well that this is a trap that Ruto will not want to get into. But ladies and gentlemen, I want to read your feedback. What do you prefer? Do we go IPPG or we go? Because, mark this, the breaking point, if it is not handled well, is this. Leave alone even audit of servers. Audit of servers is for politics of consolidating support base. But on this IPPG, it's the future aspect. Remember, we also have elections after this. So Ruto will want, okay,